Eagles Entertainment.
Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that move, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's beat these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. Fran, here we go. Touchdown!
You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right, another week, and we're back to discuss the offseason so far as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 388. At the top of today's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with Greg Cosell from NFL Films, so we can talk about this Eagles offseason. And if you're listening to this show, you're likely very aware of who the team has brought in via free agency. Hopefully, you've been tuning in to the Eagles Insider podcast with Dave Spadaro to get caught up there. You know the players they've brought in through the draft. Hopefully, you've been subscribed to the Journey to the Draft podcast to get caught up over there. But how do all of these pieces come together now? Greg and I are going to talk through this on both sides of the football. We're going to answer some big questions, talk big picture about this team and how it's different than the one that left the field in Tampa back in January. We're going to do all that right at the top of the show here in Chalk Talk. Before we get there, one more thing I want to make sure I hit on. As always, the best way to hit us up on the show and to throw us your support, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, leave us a review. We want to make sure you're subscribed. Get ready for this Eagles season here in 2022. Training camp is a lot closer than you think. Obviously, we've got mini camps here over the next few weeks, but make sure you stay subscribed right here to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. With that said, let's get into this. Excited to talk with Greg now about this Eagles team at this state in the offseason. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
All right, excited to welcome back here for Chalk Talk, my friend Greg Cosell from NFL Films. And Greg, today I really want to look at the state of this Eagles roster as we sit here in early May. And obviously the offseason is not over. This is a team that is always building. We've seen Howie Roseman and this Eagles front office look to acquire players throughout the course of the calendar year. And so the way we're talking about this team now is not the team that's necessarily going to suit up here in the first week of September. That said, I think it is really interesting because you and I have not done an Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast since the team left the field against the Tampa Bay Bucks back in January in the playoffs. So to me, it's just kind of looking and just kind of pushing the pause button and seeing how far this team has come and how it's changed since that point. And it's a really interesting exercise because, you know, we could talk about it from an everyday, every week standpoint, but almost just saying like, all right, let's just pause and go position by position. This team's a lot better right now than it was when they last took the field.
Well, and I would say offensively, and obviously they made one major addition, but offensively, it's going to be relatively the same. It's defensively, I think we're going to see some interesting things, perhaps. I don't know, Fran. When you look at the roster right now, if you look at the depth chart, I think with few exceptions, there's a lot of the same people in the same positions. But obviously the few that are different are really big and really important.
Yeah, I mean, look, the quarterback room hasn't changed all that much. I think the big thing there from a different standpoint is what is the leap that Jalen Hurts is able to make, right? And the quarterback that's making that jump from year 2 to year 3. It's year 1 in the system to year 2. It's the first time that Jalen Hurts has been in the same system over the course of an entire offseason, going back to high school. And so what kind of jump can he make? Obviously, that's going to be one of the biggest stories of the entire season for this Eagles football team.
Without question. And I think by what they've done this off season, they've also said that, you know what, our offense is not really going to look exactly the same as it did a year ago. And I think you and I know, obviously, Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni know that to advance and get to where they want to go, which is to be a champion, and you move further in the playoffs and be a champion, that they would need more from their passing game. And I think that they've made moves along with the hope that Jalen Hurts will continue to progress, but that they've moved in that direction. And I think that's the right direction.
Obviously, we don't know the areas that he's definitely – we can't sit here with a crystal ball and say, yeah, well, he's going to get better in this area, this area, this area, this area. But let me paint the question to you this way. What are the areas where you see young quarterbacks get better? You know, there are some things that can improve, especially over like a course of an offseason or, a 8 to 15 month period, we'll say. Is there an area of his game where you say like, yeah, this is an area where you can expect that a guy can make that jump?
let's answer it this way. He's now in the second year in the same system.
Yep.
So I think what you hope is that guys see things a little bit faster. That's what you want. You want them to have a better feel for your own offense, which he will, because he's now in it and working on it every day. So number one, a better feel for your own offense and the timing and rhythm that's involved in that. And also you then develop a better feel for NFL defense and how defenses play. There are certain things that are standard with all teams. There's other things that are specific to teams. There's the way different teams might play cover 3 differently. You get a better feel for how teams do things and general principles of defense. And in an ideal world, what starts to happen is you see things sooner, ideally before the snap of the ball, and then you're simply validating and confirming after the snap. And that increases the speed with which you can play. So that's what you hope with Jalen Hurts, is that he just sees things quicker. And, you know, we used to talk last year about the number of throws that we felt he left on the field, which is very common, by the way, for young quarterbacks, as you well know. So what you're hoping is those throws that he left on the field where he didn't turn it loose to open receivers, that just clicks quicker now. And if it does, then you'll see the improvement.
And that's the thing, is like as those small gains start to mount up, what you typically see with younger players is, all right, well, now you're feeling a little more confident. You're playing a little bit more loose. That's where coaches like to say, you know, a guy's playing fast, is that he's playing confident. And now it's almost like when you're learning, the analogy we've used in the past is you're learning how to drive a car. If you reflect now the way you get in your car and you get into, you jump on 76 or on I-95, and you say, all right, well, the way I jump on that now, it's second nature. When I first got behind the wheel, that was a much different kind of task, right? And so you kind of take for granted some of those small things that maybe seemed so large previously when you were younger. And that's what you're kind of hoping, is those little small, minute gains for a young quarterback like Jalen Hurts. And that can be the difference.
And you make a great point. It's not necessarily big plays. It's just routine plays.
Yep.
It's when it's 2nd and 10 and there's a throw there for 7 yards, and that's the play. You just turn it loose, you get 7 yards, and now all of a sudden you're at 3rd and 3. Kind of plays that don't seem that big in a game, but they are. And I think that, more than likely, I would assume that Jalen will take that next step. We know he's a worker. We know that he thinks the game. So I think we're all expecting that next step will be taken.
All right, well, let's go to the running back position. Again, a group that hasn't changed all that much.
No.
Jordan Howard remains unsigned, so he's still on the free agent market. The team retained Boston Scott. Obviously, you have a young player like Kenny Gainwell that you're looking to continue to ascend, and Miles Sanders still here as the number 1 ball carrier. So I think when you look at this run game, and obviously that was a focal point of this Eagles offense, especially in the second half of the year, that remains very much intact. And obviously, Jalen Hurts is a big part of that as well.
And I think that's going to be the balance that they have to figure out. Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, Brian Johnson, they've got to figure out what the balance is between using Jalen Hurts as a meaningful factor in their run game, but yet expanding the pass game. And that's not a mathematical equation, Fran. There's no specific answer to that. It's just that's a feel, and you've got to figure it out, because you don't want to lose Hurts's element and his dimension as a runner. You want to have the zone read available, that look available all the time, or a good percentage of the time, because it stresses and challenges defenses. But on the other hand, that can't be 80% of your offense. So I don't know what the answer to that is. Like I said, that's not a specific mathematical equation, but I think that's something they have to figure out.
Yeah, and obviously when you have that element, it really just adds to the multiplicity they have on offense, and especially, particularly in the run game, not even just offensively, but just the run game. We talked about all the different run concepts and how creative the coaching staff has gotten. Obviously, Jeff Stoutland as the run game coordinator, a big part of that is marrying up all of their different run concepts from all of those different looks. And when you add in the RPO game, when you add in the zone read element, when you add in all those different layers, now they can make one play look like 7 different things, or they can make 7 plays all look like the same, right? And so it works kind of both ways, and they were able to do that at a high rate last year.
Right. And now you have to add in the hope that the pass game becomes more expansive. So that's where the balance comes in, and that's where the coaches have to figure that out. And that might be something that's a work in progress once the season starts, because you just don't know.
All right. Well, you mentioned the pass game being a little bit more expansive. the Eagles have made some additions there, and none bigger than A.J. Brown. Obviously, draft weekend. You and I have not talked about this addition yet. A huge addition for this Eagles offense, for this Eagles pass game. I guess just 3,000-foot view, A.J. Brown, how you view him at this stage in terms of the wide pantheon of receivers in the NFL.
Oh, I think A.J. Brown, without going through a list of receivers, I can't sit here and say top 4, top 5, but I mean, he is clearly a top 10 receiver and maybe better than that. And let's just talk about him as a player. He came from a team in Tennessee that actually did a lot of, I don't want to say it was all RPOs, but it had that look. Sometimes when I watch tape, and I know you probably feel the same way, you don't know if it's a true RPO or if it's just quick game, bang play action. But the point is, he ran a ton of in-breaking routes. He ran slant routes. He ran glance routes. He's phenomenal run after catch. He's physical. He's competitive. He can make tough catches. He's probably going to run a lot of those same kind of routes in the context of the Eagles passing game. So I think for what the Eagles want, besides the fact that he's just a really good receiver overall, I think for what the Eagles want to do with their pass game and how it plays off their run game looks, is A.J. Brown is absolutely perfect. And I think the run after catch is critical. He's one of the best run after catch receivers in the NFL.
I mean, how many times did we hear Nick Sirianni last year talk about like the dog mentality? And it was almost on a weekly basis. That was
he's got that. He's an alpha dog.
That is A.J. Brown to a T.
Yep. Yeah. No, he has that. And he's got the body. See, I think Devonta Smith has the same attitude. It's just he's 160 pounds.
Yep.
A.J. Brown is 225 or somewhere in that range. I don't know what he absolutely weighs as we speak today, but he is super competitive. He's phenomenal run after catch. He makes contested catches. He fights for the ball. I mean, he's just a really, really good receiver. I would assume that he'd be, in normal circumstances, nothing's 100%, that he'd be the boundary X and that Devonta Smith would now move to the movement Z, which I think is really his best position to maximize his traits. And then I guess you probably have Quez Watkins. He would be the number 3, I think, right now, would he not?
Well, and that's the thing is you've got the verticality with Quez Watkins. You've got certainly what Jalen Reagor brings to the table in terms of all the different ways they can use him. And we saw a little bit of that throughout the fall. This team signed Zach Paschall.
I like a lot, by the way.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Paschall is like that perfect, whatever that backup receiver, that 3, 4, 5 receiver, where he's a dirty work player. He's very reliable. He's a really good player on third down in the red zone, just a very reliable, dirty work player.
I agree. And I think this gives the coaching staff an awful lot of options. And we don't know how all this will play out until the season starts. And obviously they're not going to show a lot of this in preseason games. Now, you're at practice every single day, so you'll see the kinds of things they're working on. But I think this gives them a lot of options to and how they want to line up. And we'll get to their draft choices, but they still can line up in 12 personnel as well. I thought that Grant Calcetero was a really intriguing pick in the 6th round. And we'll get to that unless you want to get to that now.
No, you can get into it. What do you think of Calcetero?
Well, first of all, I remember him really well 2 years ago when he was a sophomore at Oklahoma, and people spoke about him as he's the next great tight end because he's a receiving tight end. He's extremely athletic. He's a 3-level dimension. He's a speed player for a tight end. He can run the vertical seams. He can run intermediate routes. He can run other vertical routes. That's really what he is. And, I think that if you line up with 2 tight ends with Goddard and Calcetero, assuming that's the way it plays out, we don't know he's a 6th round pick, so you never know with 6th round picks, but he gives you something that no other tight end on the roster right now gives you, other than, of course, Goddard. The other tight ends don't give you what Calcetero's traits are. So assuming he makes the team, you can do a lot of interesting things out of 12 personnel.
I do think that this tight end room has gotten really interesting over the last few weeks because you added Calcetero. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside makes the move from wide receiver to tight end. So you've got a dimension there. Tyree Jackson showed outstanding. I mean, he was outstanding last summer, and obviously he's coming off the injury. But the team signed Noah Togiai at the end of last summer, and he was a player that they were really high on when he was a rookie coming out of Oregon State a couple of years ago. Jack Stoll, he's going into year 2 now. So there are a lot of young players with that group behind Goddard. Now it's just a matter of
pecking order and who fits in where.
They're not all going to make the team.
They're not all going to make it.
They're not all going to make the team. So
what that competition looks like will be fun to watch and fun to follow.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be 3 tight ends that they keep and maybe one on the practice squad, but 3 tight ends that'll probably dress because they do play 13 personnel. So, it's Goddard. And after that, I think you're uncertain.
Yeah, just going back to receiver really quickly, the team did retain Greg Ward. He was brought back on a 1-year contract. Devin Allen as a free agent that they signed. Absolute speedster. Coming out of Oregon a few years back.
Oh, he was the track guy.
He was a track guy, right?
Yeah.
So, Olympic trials and all of those things. So I think when you look at Devin Allen, what he does this summer, that'll be a storyline that people will follow. But I think when you look at just this receiver room, and honestly, Greg, like I was thinking about this earlier today. When you look at that trio of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, and you can put them in whatever order you like to, I don't know that there's a better young trio out there in the league. That's got to be up there as a 1, 2, 3 group. That's a good group. And so you're really setting Jalen Hurts up for success from that standpoint. And so, and even, when obviously they make the trade last Thursday night, on Friday morning, the morning of day 2 of the draft, I ended up just coming in and watching A.J. Brown film. I watched every single target over the last 2 years and just kind of thinking like, all right, like how do they, he and Devontae complement each other? They have so many similarities. It's exactly like you said. There are so many similarities between those 2 players, but they do it in such a different package because, A.J. Brown obviously being a 220-pound receiver that can line up inside, outside. Devontae, much different than that in terms of the slender build that he brings. But I'm fascinated just to see how they deploy all of these guys because they all have that inside-outside versatility, that ability to impact all 3 levels of the field.
Well, how many receivers do you think they'll keep?
It's a good question. I mean, I think when you look at,
you know that the top 4 are Smith, Brown, Watkins. I'm not giving an order. I'm just giving the 4. Smith, Brown, Watkins, Paschall. They're going to be the 4. After that, how many receivers do they keep? And I think there's going to be competition for those positions after that.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really fun to be able to watch that play out. And obviously, you have Jalen Reagor, you have Greg Ward, you have Devin Allen, John Hightower still on the roster. I think you go down the list, there are a bunch of young players here on that roster that are going to be competing for those spots. And so that will be one of the big storylines once we get into training camp. Let's get into the offensive line, and obviously an area that this team will always prioritize. They will always put emphasis on filling in that position. And when you're looking at the offensive line, the big addition was the rookie 2nd-round pick, Cam Jurgens out of Nebraska, a center by trade, has that versatility to be a swing backup on the interior as well as a guard. So we'll see exactly where he lines up over the course of the summer. But Cam Jurgens is in. The team loses Brandon Brooks to retirement. Nate Herbig was released after the draft. Jason Kelce retained. So overall, you're looking at pretty much all the big names back in play here for this Eagles offensive line. It's going to be one of the best in the league. It should be one of the best in the league once again, Greg.
It's essentially the same group. It'll be the same starting 5. So they're good to go. Jurgens was not drafted to play this year. I personally don't think he's really ready to play this year, but that's my opinion based on tape. But I think that they're all set. They have one of the best O-lines in the league. And I think some guys will just keep getting better. I would expect Mcleod to just continue to get better. He started to play really, really well, and I think he'll just continue to get better. I would expect Dickerson, who's now another year removed from that bad knee injury, I would expect him to be better. And he was really good in the run game a year ago. I think he'll be better in pass protection this year. We know about Lane Johnson, Sayamalu. He's turned out to be a really solid NFL guard. Yep. So this is a really, really good O-line.
And a bunch of young guys behind them competing. I mean, Nate Herbig is out, but Jack Anderson, who the team acquired late in the midseason last year. Sua Opeta, they've groomed. Coyote Awashika, they have groomed, right? So you have a bunch of names here that they have continued to develop, continue to groom over the course of the last couple of seasons, and again, will create a really interesting dynamic once you get to the summer from a camp battle standpoint. Let's get over to the defensive side. As you mentioned, more turnover here than what we've seen on the opposite side. And we'll start up front. And we'll talk D-line, but I want to include the Sam linebackers in there as well, just because of the impact those guys can have. We'll kind of do it from kind of position by position. At Sam linebacker, Jannard Avery, who was last year's starter, he's out. He's signed a free agent deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The team signed Hassan Reddick to a big free agent contract at the open of free agency, and they select Kyron Johnson on day 3 of the draft. And so real quickly, let's just talk about what Reddick brings to the table here. It's interesting because Avery was kind of used as that jack of all trades type player, and Reddick certainly offers that versatility. but Reddick is just such a better, more proven pass rusher. And so, he's going to offer that kind of juice that the Eagles did not have off the edge last year.
Yeah, I mean, Reddick's a terrific pass rusher, and I think that's how he'll be featured. Yeah. Now, when they're in their base defense, which will be a 5-2, he'll be a Sam linebacker. He'll be on the ball. And in those defenses, depending on what the offense is showing you, he may not rush the quarterback in those situations. But for the most part, when they go into their nickel or dime, Haason Reddick will be a pass rusher, and he's a very good pass rusher. Now, last year they tried Patrick Johnson, who's still on the roster, as he played meaningful snaps for a stretch of games and then sort of disappeared. They drafted Kyron Johnson from Kansas, who it would seem to me would be the guy who would also play that position. Did you see this? Did you see the same?
That's how I saw Kyron Johnson. It's funny, he definitely has that skill set of Haason Reddick in terms of just that speed off the ball. I actually wrote down Patrick Johnson when I studied him back in December, Greg, and that was the guy that the Eagles drafted last year, and will be in that discussion too, behind Haason Reddick. So I think he fits that role.
I kind of enjoyed watching Kyron Johnson's tape. I mean, he's not going to be a true edge rusher on every play. He's 230 pounds, but he was kind of fun to watch because he plays with such energy. He made a ton of plays in pursuit. He never gave up on plays. He was kind of fun to watch.
He was. He's a really interesting player just because of the athletic background, the proven versatility. He's played every linebacker spot over the course of his career, a proven 4-core special teams player. And so you feel like, okay, he can come in and play that role right away as a backup and be able to impact kickoff, kick return, punt return, and be able to play in those packages. But then also defensively, give you a little bit of juice off the edge if necessary, behind Reddick and behind some of these other guys. Now, that's what the Eagles did off the edge. Also, you get the return of Brandon Graham, who the Eagles only had for 1.5 games last year.
And I'm real curious to see, how he does, because that's a tough injury. Yep. But and he's a really good guy, so I hope he can come back and play. Yep. But I mean, again, you look at this D line. It's Graham, it's Cox, it's Hargrave, it's Barnett, it's Josh Sweat. Yep. I mean, I think. Look, far from it for me to speak about what Jonathan Gannon should or shouldn't do. He's a lot smarter than I am, but I would just love to see Josh Sweat be a wide 9 player. I think he could get 15 sacks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're going to see all these guys rotated through. There's just so many players that they were able to bring in, and they retained Derek Barnett, like you mentioned. It's a really good group off the edge. And then you look to the interior. They retained Fletcher Cox. He's brought back on a 1-year deal. You lose Hassan Ridgeway, but you gain Jordan Davis in the first round. And Jordan Davis, we talked about this on the Journey of the Draft podcast. He was the mock draft pick in the mock draft extravaganza on that show, Greg. So we talked a little bit about Jordan Davis there, but just talking about him in the structure of this Eagles defense, behind Fletcher Cox, behind Javon Hargrave, mixing in there, it's going to be fascinating just to see his usage here and his deployment in year one.
Yeah, the most fascinating player in the draft to me, given what he was asked to do in college versus what I believe the Eagles think he can do as he plays in his career. We know you do not draft a player with the 13th pick in the first round and you trade up to get him to play 20 snaps a game. That might be what he plays this year, but that's clearly not why he was drafted. So it's going to be a fascinating situation. The guy has great, for his size, has great athleticism. Didn't really rush the passer a whole lot in college. It wasn't even in the game on third downs, but we know that he's a phenomenal athlete with great size, can move exceptionally well. So like I said, it'll be interesting to watch his development because you don't do what they did to have him play 20 snaps a game for the next 3 or 4 years.
So talking about, we've talked a little bit about what Jordan Davis did in Georgia. But when you look around the league and you look at the impact of a guy like a Vita Vea in Tampa Bay, we can go down the list of it. The type of player that we were talking about, Haloti Ngata in his prime. What do you make of the idea? Because this it's coming into, more into the discussion right now because of what defenses did a year ago with all the different too high schemes and, trying to take away the deep ball and things of that nature. The idea of, okay, well, a player like Jordan Davis adding value to a team like that, because now you can, safely and more efficiently defend the run with a lighter box because you've got a player of Jordan Davis's caliber. What do you think of that whole discussion? Obviously, again, that's nothing new. That's something we've seen in the league for years and years and years. As we know, this is all cyclic.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, not because of Jordan Davis, because of, just watching NFL tape. I watch most teams during the NFL season. I don't think it quite works that way. I mean, there's a lot of teams offensively in their run game that just the way run games are mapped out where they double team interior players. That's just built into run games. I guess we'll have to wait and see whether a team thinks that we have to do something special for Jordan Davis. I don't know if that's true or not. He hasn't played in the NFL yet. We don't know that. But I don't think that that's necessarily true. So let's say Jordan Davis comes into camp, has an unbelievable, let's just map this out, and do some hypotheticals. Sure. Let's say Davis comes into camp and is absolutely dominant, and the Eagles decide that in their base 5-2, he's going to play instead of Fletcher Cox. Because Cox is older, they want to keep him fresh, they want to make him a pass rusher. Let's just say that for the moment. So if he plays in their 5-2, okay, is he going to line up as your 1 technique, or is he going to be like a 3 technique or a 4-eye?
I mean, my guess would be that he would play as the 1. I guess the big question is, instead of it being like, instead of phrasing it, he plays instead of Cox, does he now say, okay, well, because last year Hargrave was the 1 and Cox was more of the 3.
Right.
Now you could say, okay, Davis is the 1. You can have
Josh Sweat was kind of like the 4-eye 5 technique.
Yeah. So now you could put Fletcher as the 4-eye, or you could put Hargrave as the 4-eye, and then you have you can keep Josh Sweat out in the perimeter.
You could. So they have a lot of options.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is, if Davis is playing in that role in your base, I guess we'll find out how teams feel about him, based on their tape study.
Right.
But, that's how I would think Jordan Davis would be the biggest factor this year. Yep. My guess is he's not going to start the season playing in their nickel or their dime.
Right. And that's the thing, is then because you take into account guys like Milton Williams, right?
I thought had a phenomenal and totally overlooked rookie season just in general. Not overlooked, I'm sure, by people like you and I in the organization. But given that he was a 3rd-round pick from Louisiana, I thought he had a phenomenal rookie season.
I would agree. Milton Williams is going to be a big part of this defensive front. And then you look at some of the other young guys, guys that were day 3 picks or undrafted last year. The Teron Jacksons played plenty last year. Marlon Tuipulotu played plenty. Marvin Wilson chipping in as well. So I would keep an eye on a lot of those young guys up front along the defensive line. Let's now transition to linebacker, Greg. 2 big additions. No more Alex Singleton. He left for Denver. So the team acquires Kaiser White in free agency from the LA Chargers. I want to get your thoughts on Kaiser White. And then they draft Nakobe Dean. Kaiser White, Nakobe Dean in. Thoughts on what Kaiser White can bring to this defense?
Kaiser White's a good player. He was a safety at West Virginia, made the transition to linebacker in the NFL. Really solid player. He played all downs for the Chargers a year ago, so he stayed on the field in nickel, which is really important for the Eagles because they did not really have a true nickel linebacker a year ago. So I think White's a really, really good addition, and he'll play probably almost every snap. I mean, Singleton almost played every snap. Not as much, I guess, last year as he did the year before, but I think White will essentially be on the field pretty much every snap. And the question becomes, who's going to be the nickel linebacker with him?
Sure. And I guess that's where we'll see if Nakobe Dean can kind of chip in there. Obviously, TJ Edwards returns. Davion Taylor coming off the injury. He's now going into year 3. Sean Bradley going into year 3. Jacoby Stevens going into year 2. So a bunch of young guys. And again, that's an interesting competition because I don't know that all of those guys are going to make this team, right? And so
right.
So that's going to be a very important conversation to have once we get into August and early September. What did you think of Nakobe Dean? And obviously a big acquisition that's gotten a lot of fanfare here. So over the last week and change.
Yeah, I really liked his tape. I think that his tape was really strong. I thought that because Kirby Smart is one of there's fewer college coaches who do this than there are more, but obviously Georgia ran almost a pro-style defense, so there was a lot of blitzing involved, and he was asked to blitz a lot. He was very, very good at it, and I'm very curious to see if they take advantage of that particular trait. I mean, certainly if you do that, then he could play in your nickel because he's a very good blitzer. And as you and I both know, blitzing doesn't always mean you have to rush 5. You could do a zone exchange concept where you rush 4 and play zone behind it, and Dean could be one of the 4. But he was a really good blitzer. I thought he was a very good stacked backer as well. He's very short area explosive. He was a good tackler. He got people to the ground. I thought his tape was really good. There were two issues with Dean probably for teams. Number one, he's close to the bottom of the spectrum for height for a stacked linebacker. And I'm sure some teams, no matter what his tape looked like, probably felt, I'm not sure we want to draft Nakobe Dean as a 5'11" and a quarter stacked backer. And the other issue is he's had a lot of injuries. So the concern is, smaller guy, is he going to spend a lot of time in the training room?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the only way you can kind of explain him falling to the third round, right? And that's
tape was better than a third round pick. I think you would agree with that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, obviously a guy that is, again, a lot of fanfare for the Eagles since he was drafted on night 2 of the NFL draft. Let's go down to the secondary, and obviously this is going to be a big topic of conversation over the next few weeks and couple months going into camp. Steven Nelson, last year's starting corner opposite Darius Slay, he is out. He signed a contract with the Houston Texans. The team retained Andre Sachere, and that's it at corner. So no big additions there yet. Zach McPherson, Tay Gowan, Mac McCain, Josiah Scott, Kerry Vincent Jr., a bunch of young corners, year 2, year 3 types that now have that ability to fight for that starting job opposite Slay. That's how we sit here today. Remember, the team acquired Steven Nelson just before training camp last year. They traded for Ronald Darby just before the season started back in 2017, right? So you've seen their ability to kind of make those acquisitions at that position late in the preseason process. But we'll see. What do you think here in terms of this cornerback room?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm most fascinated, Fran, by 2 of their undrafted free agent signings. Because I think Josh Jobe and Mario Goodrich were good enough to be drafted. Yeah. Based on my tape study. Now, I know Josh Jobe has other issues that are off the field issues, so I can't go there because I don't know what they are, but he was without question a draftable player, as I thought was Mario Goodrich. So I'm curious to see, because I think that other position is pretty open. Wouldn't you agree? Opposite Darius Slay?
Yeah, I mean, it was last summer when Nelson first got signed, he was a little bit slow just to kind of get into the lineup. Zach McPherson got a ton of reps and he flashed throughout the course of camp. He didn't play too much during the fall, but McPherson will be interesting. And he was last year's 4th round pick. And so we'll see if he gets an opportunity.
Well, I think he'll probably get the first opportunity. Yeah. Because he did play meaningful snaps a year ago. I thought he struggled a bit, which, hey, rookies do struggle.
Yeah, sure.
So we'll see, with a year's experience. I mean, he was a big-time recruit, went to Penn State as a big-time recruit before he transferred to Texas Tech. And obviously a 4th round pick, which, hey, that's not a throwaway pick. So he'll probably get the first opportunity. I don't know much about Tay Gowan, so I can't speak to him other than the fact that he's long. But as I said, I think Jobe and Goodrich were both draftable players. I mean, I think if we were talking about Josh Jobe a year or so ago, we would have easily said he could have been a day 2 pick.
Yeah, I mean, that's how he was talked about for sure. I mean, yeah. I saw him in the back end of the too early mock drafts, right? So that's certainly how he was perceived coming into the year.
His tape was not bad. I mean, it wasn't 1st round tape, but his tape was better than a free agent grade. And like I said, I think there's other issues. And I thought Mario Goodrich's tape was better than a free agent grade as well.
Yeah, I thought Goodrich, he went to the Senior Bowl. I thought he was a solid player at Clemson, really well-rounded.
I mean, he's 175 pounds, and that might turn people off. There's always reasons when you talk to people, and hey, these people doing this are pretty smart, so there's always valid reasons. But I'm just saying, based on my tape study, and I did both those guys in detail, as I'm sure you did, they were worthy of being drafted to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we say this all the time. There's a reason the undrafted guys are undrafted. There's a reason why the day 3 guys didn't go on day 2. There's a reason why the day 2 guys didn't go on day 1. They can't all be 1st round picks. And so it's a matter of who are the guys that are able to overcome their weaknesses, or do they go to places that are able to accentuate their strengths, and where can they improve? And so that's going to be big for a lot of these guys. Safety. Big loss here. Rodney Mcleod, he was the starter that left. He goes to the Indianapolis Colts. The team retained Anthony Harris. So it seems that young safety Marcus Epps kind of in line for that starting job opposite Harris here, Greg. I know that you've liked Anthony Harris or Marcus Epps over the last couple of years.
I do like Marcus Epps. I think he can play on the back end. I think he can play in the box. I think he's aggressive. I think he's physical. I think he's got some coverage ability. He can blitz. And again, I'm not sitting here by describing what I just did. I'm not suggesting he's a top 5 safety in the NFL, but I think Marcus Epps, who's a young player still, I think he's one of those guys that if he does play really well during camp and wins the job and gets that opportunity to play more than, 15, 18 snaps a game, I think Marcus Epps could turn out to be a very solid player. I really do.
And honestly, they've got another young safety there in Kayvon Wallace going into year 3, year 2 in this system. Is he a guy that can make that next step? And because he showed some flashes last summer, can he make that next step and maybe try and compete for one of those spots? And even if it's not a starting spot, a key role in sub package, because we saw that last year with Marcus Epps when they went into some of those 3 safety packages that he was able to come in. So we'll see if Wallace can kind of chip in, or if the team decides that they want to try and make another addition there in that room. So that'll be something to follow here as well.
Yeah, I don't know if he's as multidimensional as Epps overall in his traits,
right?
But no, he certainly played meaningful snaps, so it's not as if he's not been on the field.
It's just one of those things, Greg, when I look at going through the exercise before we did the podcast and just saying like, all right, like, the who's in, who's out kind of deal. It's like, man, like this is a team that's better than when they took the field last in Tampa Bay. I think when you look at it on the whole, this is a team that got better on both sides of the football.
I would agree. And as it always does, Fran, and you know this, it's going to come down to the quarterback.
Yeah.
If Jalen Hurts can improve, and there's no reason to believe that he won't, if he can improve in a meaningful way and their pass game can become more expansive, this could be a really difficult offense to defend.
I love it. Well, Greg, we'll continue to talk about this team, obviously, over the next few months. I appreciate you joining us here once again on Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade.
Thanks, Fran.
Eagles fans, Merrill Reese here to tell you about the Eagles Autism Challenge, presented by Lincoln Financial Group. This annual ride, run, walk event supports autism research and programming as we work hard every day to advance the conversation from awareness to action. This year's event will take place on Saturday, May 21st at Lincoln Financial Field. With your support, we can help transform the lives of individuals affected by autism. Register today at eaglesautismchallenge.org.
All right, great stuff there from Greg. Thanks to him, and thank you to all of you out there for your continued support of this show and all the rest of our podcasts here with Eagles Entertainment. That being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I'm Fran Duffy. We'll talk to you next week.